A dark, macabre story lies beneath Lubiri's imposing hills in Mengo. This was one of Idi Amin's torture dungeons, now converted into a tourist spot. Many of the victims here were put to death by hammers and crowbars. Others, kept in the blood-spattered chambers, sealed with a sliding gate, were electrocuted by a stream or suffocated to death in a crowded trap without ventilators. Across Kampala's high-rise building nestled across the lush Seven Hills lies a number of places that are indelibly linked to the country's dark past. From the 1966 crisis to President Idi Amin's reign of terror, to the 1980s Pandagari, to where we are today, these events have left both a heavy human toll and a trail of destruction. President Amin, famously immortalized in the Hollywood's Academy awarded The Last King of Scotland, turned the Lubiri Palace first into an armory and later a torture dungeon where hundreds met their fate. Suite 211 in Nile Mansions along Nile Avenue was famous for interrogations. In one photo, Amin is famously carried in a sedan chair by 4 foreign volunteers for an installation he called the white man's burden. Amin's notorious State Research Center was headquartered at Chagwe Road, Nakasero, next to State House. Under Obote II, the building next to KCCA's main gate and Argentina House near Bulange served as torture dungeons run by the intelligence outfit National Security Agency. According to the 1994 report titled Pile of Blood by the Commission of Inquiry into Human Rights Violations between 1962 to the NRM's coming into power in 1986, the Amin State Research Center accounts for the largest number of cold-blooded murders in Uganda's post-independence history. The building, housing the State Research Center reportedly, had an underground tunnel connecting it to the nearby State House in Nakasero. During the commission hearings, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Itabuka, one of the outfit's directors, was reluctant to speak about those killed at Nakasero. He told the commission, and I quote, "I have never seen a dead body at the State Research, but what I know is sometimes they used to kill some people." 4 months after he took power in 1986, President Museveni established the Commission of Inquiry to look into the cycle of violence that plagued the country in the preceding 24 years. The then Attorney General, Joseph Mulenga, appointed High Court judge at the time, Arthur Odell, as its head. Other members of the commission included then Makerere University Lodon Kidu Makobuya, Dr. Jack Luyombia, DPs John Kawanga, Joan Kakwenzire, and John Nagenda. It was the second commission in a space of 12 years. Earlier, in 1974, President Amin, who had toppled Obote, had established the Commission of Inquiry into the disappearance of civilians whose whereabouts were unknown since the coup in 1971. The Justice Odell-led commission produced its report in October 1994. The commission methodically structured its findings into 3 main parts, namely forced disappearances, murders and killings, and arbitrary arrests and detentions. The report reads in part, and I quote, "The exact number of Ugandans that have lost their lives at the hands of government agents and agencies since independence is impossible to establish. The number of individuals, mass murders and arbitrary deprivation of life or extrajudicial executions is a violation of the right to life, one of the most fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual." However, the commission further noted that, and I quote, "The location of many military barracks within or close to large urban population centers greatly contributed to human rights violations by the military. One of the most notorious barracks where many Ugandans lost their lives at the hands of Amin's soldiers was Machindye. After the military coup of January 1971, the barracks was turned into the headquarters of the military police and has remained so ever since. The harrowing account of kidnap and torture of writer Kakwenza Rukirashaija, who was arrested early last month for abusing President Museveni and his son, Lieutenant General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, has during the last weeks reawakened old demons and renewed debate about torture and gross human rights violations by security agencies under the current regime. Specifically, Kakwenza's Odell struck a chord with countless tales of hundreds of especially National Unity Platform supporters, especially from the central region, who have been menaced by security agencies, JAT, CMI and the Special Forces Command since the late 2020. While a Uganda court magistrate had warned Kakwenza from discussing his case in the media, he instead stripped and broadcasted his torture marks to the world before fleeing to exile. This as since last year, NUP has during its weekly press briefings been parading one after another of their supporters who were maimed or tortured by security agencies.
So there's a way they put those things, then stand on at a distance. Then they switch on whatever they switch on, and you feel like your whole entire body is electrocuted. Then they tell you, aha, tell us. Now, once you don't speak immediately, they come again and kick you. Now, the first is painful, but the second time they switch on is worse.
While
in the safe house, they would use many tools in torture. They would pinch our skin with pliers. Other times, they would use a carpenter vise to clamp your limbs, hands or legs, like wood. All in the name of making you confess, sometimes of things you have no idea about.
A police patrol car intentionally knocked us while we were riding on a border during Bobi Wine's campaigns. We fell in the middle of the road and an oncoming truck crushed my leg that it needed amputating.
The German philosopher George Hegel famously said, "The only thing that we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history."
I'm of the view that if there is no change in the manner in which we do politics, we are likely to see these events happening more. Because if you look at most of the human rights violations that have happened in the last 2 years, the detentions beyond 48 hours, the indiscriminate killings, the unlawful trials, have largely been born out of the politics. Security agencies looking at themselves as enforcers of the ruling party, the armed enforcers of the ruling party. And that's one of the things that the Constitution tried to change by creating in place checks and balances on every institution. Now, when we see voices, when we hear voices from the president increasingly warning Parliament, warning the judiciary, don't release people, or don't do this, we're increasingly seeing that increased interference, yet the law envisages that these three arms should work hand in hand but independently of each other. That if that independence wanes, if that independence goes on reducing and courts start being cowered into not enforcing what the law tells them to do, then we will be going into a dangerous trend.
The month of the general elections last year, President Museveni in his February 13, 2021 address on the security situation in the country, following a spate of arbitrary abductions of NUP supporters by security operatives driving in numberless vans, rejected comparison of his government to past regimes.
Under NRM cannot have that type of situation. The UPDF now, the NRA before it, the security forces we built afterwards, like the intelligence services and the police, all are taught not to be part of such a culture.
In another address on security on August 14, 2021, the president said it was unacceptable for security forces to kill anyone for whatsoever reason.
So all these mistakes barking at the people, beating people, isolated killings. There are not many, but they should not happen at all. These isolated incidents of killing, like the other time when we had riots in November, some of the people killed were definitely rioters who were attacking people. But also there were cases of what they were calling stray bullets. But where were the stray bullets going? What were you firing at? There's a report which was produced by the police, and after scrutiny, it will be made available to the public. No beating of people. All those keeping people in jail without trial. All those are caused by the following problems. First of all, indiscipline. Some of the people are indisciplined. Secondly, the senior commanders do not adequately brief the juniors.
But 28 years later, since the Odell Commission-led report was published, the spectre of the past has returned to haunt this country. There's so many examples from the past relatable to the present contained in the report. For instance, no errant security officer has been brought to book for any human rights violation, such as in the November 18th to 19th, 2020 protests, in which 48 people were killed by stray bullets, or December 2020 murder of former national boxing team captain Isaac Senyange, for which the president apologized on national television. The list of torture victims from the just concluded campaign elections is endless, many bearing lifetime injuries and scars. Some families continue searching for answers as the whereabouts of their loved ones are unknown while scores remain locked up in jail. Several families were put on notice not to ever speak about their ordeal.
The bastardization of the justice system, if I'm to use that word, was in the past was largely because of the bad politics. And if you look at history, that our constitutional history was largely hinged onto the bad politics. Leadership always made laws or influenced the laws in order to suit the politics of the day. It's sad that we're increasingly seeing signs that our justice system is then being influenced by the politics. Because first of all, if you look at the arrests and the charges, and then even those who are not charged and just held, it's a replica of the past. We've read books that there was a detention facility here, people would go in there, you'd be arrested, taken to Nile mansions, you'd be lucky to come out alive. We're increasingly hearing the same stories, that you go to this, you have taken to Mbuya, you are lucky to come out. Some of the problems that President Museveni highlighted prior to going to the bush and when he was advocating for the constitutionalism that we have been so proud of, was that government should be accountable for every citizen. If you have, and the constitutional order that we have, the 1995 Constitution, is to the effect that however heinous, however strong the evidence against you or the charges against you should be, you should have a chance to be presented before a court of law. The right to a fair hearing is a fundamental one, that no one should be held beyond these hours. If you have any charges, and we're not even advocating for criminals to walk free, we are saying prosecute them, treat them, let them face the due process, let them be convicted, and let them face whatever sentence that the law prescribes. We are increasingly seeing arrests, but with people not being taken through the due process, people not facing the law. And that is what means the dark page that we are seeing increasingly. We thought we had turned with the advent of constitutionalism.
The police and the army's public relations are keen to read scripted messages.
There's a usual song sung by many, I've heard it from several spokespersons of security agencies, that you can report to court and investigate. or you can report to police and investigate. That's what I've heard in these torture victims. But the people, if are being held in a state facility for 3 weeks, it doesn't take a genius. I would imagine that even any trainee investigator would know that this person was in the custody of these people. There are allegations against you. This person, why is it that a person you arrested walking normally has come out limping? It doesn't take a genius to say that let's first investigate this and find out who did this. They were under a known detention facility. So certainly the intention is to undermine their right to get justice, because there is no justice that can come out of the same people who you are complaining against.
The fallout from torture and arbitrary detentions has further entangled all arms of government. The largely plain parliament has been hushed in its position on the matter. The executive defends that the action of a few rogue elements cannot be used in generalization, while the conscience of the judiciary has been stained. On many occasions, tortured suspects have been hauled before judicial suspects to take plea.
Courts are already bogged down by several cases. They're already backlogged. But then too, you need services of a lawyer. You need services of a medical expert. Many medical experts fear, right now, fear to come, or they can easily examine you, but they fear to go on record, to come on oath and say that I'm ready to give evidence that this person was tortured. We've seen that. So it's already undermining your right to get justice for the victim. Many times they need professional assistance, psychosocial support of those social victims, services which are not readily available. And then, of course, you need services of legal counsel to successfully prosecute against the Attorney General, against government, or against even these individual officers. So it's costly. The process is still costly, the litigation process, but the criminal process of holding these officers to account is also costly. So the picture is gloom for a victim to get justice. The best justice they get is them being released, if that is justice at all. Them getting out of the detention facilities is a win for them. And many of them go and sit quietly and they say, we've already gone through enough, we don't want to go through any other.
During the Justice Odell Commission hearings, witness after witness gave testimonies about the dreadful murder of their relatives, family members, colleagues at work, and many more. The report notes, and I quote, "The degree of brutality and cruelty that the victims were subjected to is often unbelievable. Few survived to tell the tale." According to the 1994 report, the Army, police, state security agencies and the executive have been central in the perpetuation of the cycle of violence. From 1962 to 1986 to date, torture has been the prominent tool in the repertoire of tactics by the successive regimes against opponents, both real and perceived. Under Amin, the army and security outfits that operated through loose command structures wielded immense powers and by impulse determined the fate of hundreds kidnapped. In 1971, Amin toppled Obote, and immediately, according to the report, many army officers, mainly of Langi and Acholi origin, were massacred, acts which continued up to the end of the Amin regime as part of Amin's policy of maintaining power. Amin's public safety unit, the report notes, did not stop at torturing a victim until he was hospitalized or dumped into the mortuary, but also followed the body until they were sure the victim was completely dead. According to the report, they left instructions with mortuary attendants that whoever touched the relevant body would also be killed. Amin was eventually toppled in 1979, after which atrocities were committed in those areas associated with Amin's regime. In West Nile, the Uganda National Liberation Front, a political group formed by exiled Ugandans opposed to Amin troops, stand heavily implicated in the massive violation of human rights in the region, particularly from May 1980. The early post-Amin governments were unstable. The Obote II regime, according to the report, represented the second murder peak after Amin's time. According to the report, and I quote, "Many Ugandans lost their lives at the hands of state security personnel. The UNLA, in its efforts to dislodge the guerrilla militias of Yoweri Museveni, Andrew Kayira, etc., from the Luwero Triangle and other areas, ignored national and international law of armed conflicts and affected, tortured and murdered suspects, bandits, guerrillas, or their alleged collaborators in unknown numbers." Between 1980 to 85, Operation Panda Gari, Swahili word for border vehicle, was launched around Greater Kampala. Like today, it was a system under which the army or police in swoops collected people in large numbers from an area forced to board vehicles and transported them elsewhere for purposes of identifying whether or not they were anti-government.
The recent past, we saw the passing of the Prohibition and Prevention of Torture Act. And for us, it was a welcome gesture because we thought we had turned we had turned onto a very good leaf where all people or perpetrators of torture are going to be held accountable. It's quite ironic that at a time when we have such a good law in our law books, we have seen the most heinous of crimes of torture being perpetrated by especially state agencies. Because the past 3 or 4 years have seen a number of us turning a dark page back into the past of where we had thought we had left.
We urge the general public to report to us allegations of torture and other human rights violations for investigations and redress where necessary.
Sometime in late 2015, technocrats in the Ministry of Justice molded a second commission of inquiry into human rights violations between 1986 to 2007, especially to document human rights abuses committed in northern Uganda during the nearly 2-decade LRA insurrection as a follow-up to the Justice Odell Commission, but this did not materialize. Then there is the period from 2007 to date. And indeed, like the saying goes, the only thing that we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history.